Welcome back, everybody. This is Linnell Gardner from the state of Sonny, Liston. Today, we're going to get back into my book, Beast, The Deconstruction of Charles Sonny Liston. It's on Amazon right now. Check it out. Today, we're going to get back into kind of the social construct that was going on around the 1964, 1965 fights. Now, I'm going to eventually talk about Darwin, maybe not in this video, but later. Again, I was the first to talk about Darwin in the same breath of Sonny Liston, same context. And because I wanted to show a pattern of how racist ideology was created and how racist ideology kind of shaped people's view of Black people in America. And again, the myth of Sonny Liston is the myth of race. So even though Sonny was famous, if he wasn't famous, he would have still been treated the way he was treated by the police, by the government, by the FBI, because he was poor and Black, right? Poor people were always considered subversive according to the government. And especially Black people, they were considered, especially around that time, that era, Black people were considered, also considered subversive and anti-American. And therefore, they thought that, J. Edgar Hoover thought that Black people would be easily influenced by communists. So I'm going to get back into that a little bit in this section. And here we go. In 1964, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, the most sweeping civil rights legislation since Reconstruction. 1965 would bring more change, with the passing of the Voting Rights Act, race riots in Los Angeles, affirmative action laws, and the start of a militant organization in Oakland, California, that would one day be known as the Black Panther Party. There was a change occurring, and it was now blowing in the wind. Desegregation meant change, and change meant uncertainty. And uncertainty brought fear. There was a power shift occurring in our central government. The Voting Rights Act was changing the balance of power between Blacks and whites in the South and in the North. At that time, the public had to make a choice, and that was to either blame the government that they had put their faith and trust in for centuries, that same government that ran and controlled the Boston Commission, or to lay the blame on the Italians and the Blacks. The public ended up choosing the latter. But what evidence did the public have that made them so sure of the fact that the people involved with the fights were guilty as charged? What litmus test was the public using to make a case against the Listons, Alis, and the Palermos? So think about this. No one was ever prosecuted for the fights. There were no court hearings. There were no one was brought to, there was no trials. Sonny Liston was not even interviewed about the fights. So it's been 50 years. Over 50 years have passed. Why are we still writing about the fight as a fix? Why are we still buying books about the Ali Liston fights, magazines about the Ali Liston fights, reading editorial copy about the Ali Liston fights, documentaries about the Ali Liston fights? Why are we still buying those books based on the fact that we think that there was a fix? In a real criminal court, you need evidence. in public opinion, when you're just dealing with the public opinion, in the court of public opinion, you don't need evidence. That's the difference. That's why they can keep writing about it and telling these stories about Sonny and Sonny's life and how he lived and how he died. It's because they don't have to be liable for saying, accusing Sonny of something he didn't do. There's no stakes. So they can continue to write books and make more movies and put Sonny's stories in magazines because no one will ever call them on it because Sonny's dead. And they've had 50 years to prove their case and they can't do it. And the reason is they're not trying to. So they're not trying to prove anything because they don't have to, because people keep buying the myth. It's a cottage industry. Why mess up a good thing by telling the truth or finding out the truth? So I want to remind us in this video of the fact that, this bar of public opinion is not legitimate. These people that write these books, and they're not professional criminal investigators. Sonny is not being in front of a jury. He's not in front of a jury of his peers. The court of public opinion is not a jury of Sonny's peers. So the Liston estate and Sonny Liston doesn't have to answer to the court of public opinion. We don't give a shit about what you guys think about how Sonny lived and died. We just want to set the record straight because it doesn't matter. You're going to say what you're going to say and believe what you're going to believe no matter what. Sonny said that. That's why he didn't like some of the people in the press. Sonny had friends in the press, but there were people in the press that believed what they wanted to believe, say what they wanted to say, no matter what Sonny told them. And those same people are passing the baton to like-minded criminal, are passing the baton to other news agencies and other movie makers and other book writers, to the next generation of bullshit artists. I'm saying. So I just want to, in this quote, I just want to remind you what is needed if you're going to really present a case in the real world, in a real legitimate world of law and order. Where there's an era of reality, only having the traces of truth, a preponderance of the evidence, it is more likely than not a clear and convincing evidence. It is substantially more likely than not, beyond a reasonable doubt, no reasonable doubt could be raised. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, no doubt whatsoever could be raised. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard of evidence required to validate a criminal conviction in most adversarial legal systems. So when they're writing these books about Sonny, making these movies, etc., they're not dealing in a reality. They're dealing in a world of fiction, because it says here they need a standard of evidence to validate a criminal conviction. So if they're not trying to validate, if they're not trying to get evidence to validate a conviction, why have they been writing these books and making these movies and all this crap for 50 years? Because they're just making money. It's just about making money. It's not about getting to the truth. It's not about evidence. It's not about convictions. Or they would have done it 50 years ago. They're not dealing with any legal system. They're just writing books. They're not presenting to the FBI, the DOJ, the police. They're not presenting anything for 50 years since Sonny's died, since Sonny was alive and when Sonny was dead. They're not presenting anything. They're just writing books. They're just making money. That's all. They're not trying to get to any truth, or they would have presented their case. Generally, the prosecution bears the burden of proof. Prove it. All you people out there that are writing books and have all these YouTube channels with Sonny's theories, prove your case. Stop bullshitting. Generally, the prosecution bears the burden of proof and is required to prove their version of events to this standard. This means that the proposition being presented by the prosecution must be proven. Prove it. Prove it. Whatever you're saying out there in your books, magazines, editorial copy, movies, documentaries, YouTube videos, prove it. Prove what you're saying. You can't prove it. If you can prove it, then let's have a conversation. But for 50 years, no one's proven anything. This means that the proposition being presented by the prosecution must be proven to the extent that there could be no reasonable reason that the defendant is guilty. There can still be a doubt, but only to the extent that it would not affect a reasonable person's belief regarding whether or not the defendant is guilty. Even the criminal courts is not perfect because a reasonable doubt is subjective. So only God knows, right? Ultimately, it was so much easier to blame the Italians because of our connection with the Italian people historically. We had fought a world war under the banner of fighting against Nazism and fascism, and our war with Sicily and Mussolini was still a painful memory in our minds. We lost a lot of American soldiers to that war, and those losses weren't easily forgotten. So our hatred toward Italians seemed justified, and the loss of American life legitimized, crystallized, and reinforced that hatred. Let us not forget that in the early part of the 19th century, the Italian people were lynched and unjustifiably imprisoned. And I quote, in the early 19th century, the jails were filled with Irish, German, Italian, and Jewish immigrants. And those same immigrants were also subject to racism, police brutality, and political and social injustices, end quote. And let us also not forget that during World War II, we brought a little bit of our own homegrown hatred to the shores of Normandy. And I quote, all documents that disclosed the invasion destination were stamped with the classified code word bigot during the implementation of Operation Husky. And sentries at the planning head in Algeria determined whether visitors had appropriate security clearances by asking them if they were bigoted. Patton traveled from camp to camp preaching violence and transcendent duty. There was no better death than to die in battle for a noble and just cause. As for the Army's policy of fraternization, an army that can't fuck can't fight. Such profane performances were meant to bloodden them with language. He is a great hate builder, Patton's aide wrote, end quote. Quote, when American soldiers during the war with Sicily had a chronic reluctance of cuts and bruises to heal, the term they used to describe it was simply known as the Sicilian disease, end quote. So, we're going to get into Darwin in our next video. Again, I was the first to ever bring up Darwin in the same context of Sonny Liston in history. I don't know how, well, they say in the show, Showtime special, Pariah, The Lives and Deaths of Sonny Liston, they had they had 3 professors and 1 historian, one from Purdue, one from Ohio State, and one from Harvard, say that all black people think alike. So I guess that's what allowed them to justify using Darwin in there as a theme, a concept within a running theme throughout the 89-minute special. So I'd like them to prove, how did you come up with using Darwin in this documentary? Did you discuss Darwin in your past work in this in this context. I wrote my notes in 2008, and I published my book in 2013, Sean Assell's book, The Murder of Sonny Liston, Las Vegas Heroin and Heavyweights, came out in 2016. The Showtime special came out in 2019. So who wrote about Darwin first in this context of Sonny Liston? Through my research since 2005, I've yet to see anyone in history, in anything that I wrote, that I've read, use Darwin in the context that I've used it in my book, Beast, the Deconstruction of Charles Sonny Liston. Beast, the Deconstruction of Charles Sonny Liston. No one's ever wrote it that way before, put Darwin in the mix like that. So it's just how I think. All black people don't think alike, because I brought Darwin into this conversation. So I like those Harvard professors to show me in your past work where I know it's in prior to 2016, prior to Sean's book, which is what the Showtime special is based on. Prove to me that you wrote about Darwin and Sonny Liston in the same context before me. Prove it. I challenge you. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe. I'll see you next time.